Welcome. We're doing Chapter 13 on maintaining Windows. First, we'll cover some verifying critical Windows settings, right? So making sure Windows updates are enabled, antivirus malware software is installed, our network security settings, backups of user data, and then uninstall software and clean up the hard drive. All right, so let's do this first. So Windows updates. We just do a search on Windows updates, and then you can bring up the settings here, and you can check for updates. This has been just ran today, just an hour ago, but you can just run this, check for updates, and you can change your active hours. When it should do updates, when not to, so we won't restart without checking, right? So I've got mine set to 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. We've got some advanced options, right? Some notifications. You can pause updates. You can automatically download updates. So there's a lot of things, but the biggest thing is to make sure that your Windows updates are being done and you're up to date. Antivirus, right? So one of the things here, right, is if you go over on the right taskbar, this arrow here, you get some options and you go to the Action Center. And this is my virtual machine that I just set up for here. I don't have virus set up, but and you can set up OneDrive for recovery for antivirus. We can check our network settings. Firewall is in place. We've got some device security. Overall health. So you can check things out. Then let's see here, so backups. Right, so we can use file history, which is really a good option. Anytime you make changes to a file, it saves the original and then creates a new copy, so that you can go back versions. But you, of course, need to have a drive set up. Once again, this is my virtual machine, so I don't have it set up. I'm just using this for work to create videos. So right here, file history is off, but we could turn it on. Right now, I do have on my network, I have a network storage, so I could have all my files saved to the network storage if I want to turn it on. It also shows me a very old backup, so that on the network I have a backup available from one of my older laptops from over a year ago here, but I could restore from any backups if they existed. So you can do all kinds of things back here in the backups and advanced settings, right? So if you turn on the file history, you can save the files every hour, every 10 minutes, daily, and then how many versions, right? If you do forever, your drive will fill up very fast. So you might want to select, like 3 months or something like that, because the odds are you're not going to want to go back more than 3 months for most things. But it depends. I mean, when I was doing my dissertation, I had it set for forever because I wanted every version. But so it all depends on what you're doing and how you're doing. Just make sure you are aware that if you set it for every hour and forever, your drive will fill up very quickly. All right. And then, of course, you want to uninstall software you no longer need. So if we go to our control panel, and we can uninstall a program. So you have all the programs here that you can uninstall, and or that are installed. You just go through and say, okay, I don't need this, I don't need that. Once again, I have everything that I need on here. Although I got some stuff that I'm dealing with. I could probably remove the Python, but I'm using it. So you just go here to the uninstall or change a program from within control panel. Once again, you can see all kinds of access in control panel, and definitely you can even check your network. You can see that my network is on private network. It's on Ethernet 0. I could change some settings, right, for sharing, but since I do need to share this with my actual machine, I have some sharing turned on. And normally you might want those off in a work environment. Let's see here. Okay, and clean up the hard drive. So if you go to the hard drive and right click on it, go to properties, right, you can do a disk cleanup. And so you can have it eliminate like temporary internet files, downloaded programs, DirectX cache, system created error reporting, any we have antivirus from Windows, right? Delivery optimization files, downloads. You can clear out your downloads. I'm not going to do that because some of them I do need. I would do that individually, but you could just immediately just remove them if you knew you were good. The recycle bin, if it was full, you could do that. Any temporary files, and then clean up the system files. And then it just deletes everything and frees up space on the hard drive. Okay, so let's go back. All right. Patch management, right? So Windows has fixes and updates that come out regularly, typically on Tuesdays, Patch Tuesday. You do need to make sure you are downloading the correct patches, and x86 is for 32 bits, x64 refers to 64-bit OSs. Most of us going forward would only be dealing with 64-bit OSs. It's very rare that you'll see a 32-bit OS anymore, but it is possible. And then IA64 is a high-end Intel processor that's 64-bit, which is a little different than the consumer. You usually see those in servers. So backups, right? So it's always good to have an extra copy. You can lose data from system failures, viruses, all kinds of other problems. So definitely never trust your very important data to only one media type. Like I said, with my dissertation, I had file history turned on. I actually did a backup of that to an external drive, and then I would keep copies occasionally on thumb drives as well, so that I had it in multiple places at all times, because I didn't want to lose it or have to redo it, because it was 5 years worth of work, and it would be impossible to recreate. All right, planning for disaster recovery, right? So, a file level backup, right? That's just backing up files using the regular backup, but then you can have an image level backup where you can take an actual image of everything, the operating system and the files and the programs, and you can do an image level backup of your system. And so you definitely could need both. One is the file level is nice so that you can restore just certain files. You may not need everything, right? And you may need certain things very quickly. So a file level backup allows you to quickly access certain files to restore, and only those files right away. Whereas an image level will take longer because you're restoring everything at once. It's all or nothing, but it is everything. So with a file level, you might have to reinstall programs. First you'd have to reinstall the OS, reinstall programs, and then the files to get it back to a working state. Whereas an image level, you just put down the image and it installs the OS, the programs, and the files as it was at the time of the backup. Then it's very crucial on where you keep the backups. What is it an external drive? Is it the cloud? Is it a tape? They used to have tapes. But where's the destination? And then do you keep it on site? For a lot of organizations, you want to make sure that the backups are at least 150 miles or more away from the original site. At least a copy is, in case of a natural disaster, and because you don't want to lose your backups and your operating center at the same time, because then there was no reason for the backup. But you want copies, right? You do want to have one on site as well for quick and easy restoration if you just lose data. If the machine itself, the drives failed or something, you'd want it right there on site for an easy backup. Whereas in a natural disaster, if a flood comes or a tornado destroys the operations center, you don't want your backups, the only copy, to be at the same location. And then, right, you have various software, backup software. There's some that's built into Windows, but for most enterprise options, you're going to want a third party that has better features than what Microsoft's utility offers. And then you can have different backup strategies. They include where you might do a full backup every Friday, and then incremental backups every other day besides that, or you might just do full backups all the time. And so there's different strategies regarding how you actually back up your data, because full backups take a lot of time, but you only need one backup to restore from. If you do full backups with incrementals, it takes little time and less storage for the incrementals, because it only saves and backs up what has changed since the last full backup. But then you need all the incremental backups and the last full backup to restore from, so it takes a little more time to restore, or maybe not a little more time and a little more effort, because you have all these backups that you have to deal with versus just one. But it all depends on how often you need a backup, how much data you're backing up, how much storage you have, how critical is the data, what time frame do you need to restore the data? Do will you have hours or days? Depends. All that depends on what kind of strategy you implement. So there's too many factors to say it's always best to do full backups. It may not be for your situation. And then, right, so loss of power. Do you use UPS's, the uninterruptible power supplies, or do you have extra power generators, backup generators, things like that? These are all kinds of other ways to ensure business continuity. And then the number one thing that is probably the most important with any disaster recovery plan is to test it. You need to test and make sure your backups are going, and that you can restore from the backup. When I started at the school district, they were backing up regularly. They were doing a great job in that instance, but I went to test the backup and found that the tapes were so old they weren't actually backing up anything, and so I had to request new tapes for the backup, and unfortunately they denied my first request until the server died, and we had to go send the drives out for recovery, and it cost them $5,000 instead of $100. I wanted $100 worth of tapes, and they didn't think it was worth it, and then the drive failed, and it cost them $5,000 to get the data back. So now they realized that the tapes were actually important, but yeah, that they weren't testing that the backups were going. They were doing it like clockwork, replacing the tapes, but the tapes were so old, they were actually not recording any data. So you have to test. You have to test the backups. You have to test your disaster recovery plans. Make sure you keep your backups in a safe place. Make sure they're in a fireproof storage too, if it's tapes. Or if it's remote offsite, make sure that that's safe and secured as well. But then test it. Right, so we covered this, right? You can do the file history, but they also have a system image option that will back up everything, the Windows, applications, user settings, and data. It stores it as a single WIM file, so that it's easy to restore. All right, yeah, we showed all that. Showed that. All right. Right, back up and restore. Right. Right, and creating a system image does take time, but you should at least create one system image so that it's easy to restore from all the programs and everything. And then if you do any major program updates, you should take another system image. Right, so there's Windows System Protection, where you can do what's called restore points, and System Restore. You can run this utility to restore from those restore points at any time. All right, right. So you can use up to 15% of the disk space. If disk space gets too low, restore points are no longer made. So you have to have. I think it's actually it should be is 15% of disk available, or the restore points will no longer be made. And then they're kept in the system volume information folder. Let's see here. All right. Files, folders, and volumes, and hard drives. Okay, so low level formatting, usually that's performed at the factory, and it, when you get a hard drive, it would be already low level formatted. And then of course we have options now with MBR and GBT, which GBT partitions is what you'll most likely deal with going forward, because you want to deal with drives that are larger than 2.2 terabytes. You're going to want a GPT partition. So most of the time, that's what we'll be dealing with the newer GPT partitions versus the old MBR. GPT has the space for the MBR, so it's backwards compatible with MBR, and then it has the partition table and header, but it unlike MBR, it has a backup copy. So if this sector of the drive were to get destroyed in MBR, the old partition type, you would lose all the data on the drive. Whereas in GPT, you have a backup copy, so if this copy becomes unreadable, you have the backup copy, so you wouldn't lose the whole drive. Excuse me. All right, and then we have, once it's partitioned, we have a choice of formatting the drive. Typically, we're going to do is NTFS for Windows, because that's gives us security and other features over FAT32. The resilient REFS is a new style of system. It's still in the works. It has better fault tolerance, but it's not quite at the level that could replace NTFS yet. And then NFS, or Network File System, supports file sharing over a network across platforms. So between Mac, Linux, and Windows, you could use an NFS system. And then we could do extended FAT, EXFAT, or FAT32. Most small hard drives or USB drives are FAT32, but if you want to use large files over 4 gigs, you needed to format your USBs as NTFS, not FAT32. And then CDFS is the compact disk file system format, or the UDF, universal disk format. So these are for DVDs and CDs if you find them anymore. Okay, so right, MBR requires active partitions to boot up. You need a label 1 as active. GPT, the bootable partition, is called the EFI system partition, or ESP. And so in Windows, the active partition, or the ESP partition, is called the system partition. And the boot manager for Windows is called boot MGR with no file extension. And the boot manager turns to the volume that is designated the boot partition and where the Windows OS is stored. All right, so disk management is done using the disk management tool. We'll go out here, and so if I go in here and go to manage this PC and go under disk management, I have added 5 drives here. You'll see 1 through 4, or 1 through 5. I've added some additional drives on this virtual machine. So I can create this as a simple volume, right? And I could do just 10 gigs, right? And we'll assign it a drive letter. Let's do this small drive. Yep. And form a quick format. So so here I have FAT32 or NTFS. REFS is not an option on the workstation version of Windows. I believe it is on server. So we'll go ahead and format. And so now we've got an E drive. So if I go back out here, now I have an E drive that's empty. It's about 9 gigs is what it said, right? So I got about 9 gigs of space available. But I can extend this volume and let's do 15. Oops, I don't want to extend it. I want to, I guess I can just shrink it in amount of space, right? Size of available shrink space is 6,000. So I could shrink it to a 3 gig, right? So now I've got 16 gig over here and 3 gig over there. So now I can extend it. So there, now I made it all 20 gigs, right? And maybe I don't want to do that, so maybe I can shrink it again. Shrink the amount to shrink. We'll just do 5 gig and shrink it. So now if I go back out here and go back, so now I've got 15 gigs of drive space available. But you can see that you can easily shrink and add as long as there's space to it. But since I have other drives too, I could extend this volume and I can add all these, right? And maximum space available, total size, and I'm select amount of space in megabytes. So we'll just, oh, okay. I see, because 61,386. I won't do that, so it will only do 5. Okay. Let's do a cancel on that. Do an extend. For whatever reason, it's reading it backwards. Well, here's what you can do. Alright, so I can do a stripe volume. So this will do, if I do three disks of the same size, create the drive letter F. We're just going to call this stripe. We'll do a quick format and finish. And now, so this says I'm going to have to convert from a basic disk to a dynamic disk, because this was a basic disk. They're all basic disks when they first come in, but to do a stripe volume requires a dynamic disk. So I'll convert them to a dynamic disk. And now we've got a stripe volume between disk 2, 3, and 4, which is now my F drive. So now if I go out here, I have an F drive that is roughly 60 gigs because it's 3 drives, but the information will be striped across the drives. Now, it's not protected like a RAID 5 striped drive where it has parity data. This does not have parity data. If it did, the size of the drive would be 40 gigs because you would lose one drive. But RAID 5, when you go out here, even though it looks like it's an option, right? It's grayed out because it is not available on workstations. It is only RAID 5 is only available on servers. So Windows servers can do a RAID 5, which is basically a stripe drive, but it protects the data with parity data so that you can lose one of the drives and still be able to run because you still have all the data. And then you could replace the drive and it rebuilds. So it's like having a backup automatically with RAID 5. But Stripe, because it's got 3 disks, it will give you faster speeds if they're actually physical disks. In this scenario, you wouldn't gain anything because it's using the same physical disk that I've actually just carved out and called it 3 drives for virtualization. So I really, you wouldn't gain any performance like you would in a real machine that had 3 separate disks. So what I'm going to do is get rid of this. I'm going to delete this volume because it would gain us nothing by having that. So what I'm going to do though is we'll just do a mirrored volume, right? So this we can do, so disk 2 and disk 3, if I do this and assign it to the F drive, NTFS, and we call it mirrored in format. Now once again it needs to be a dynamic disk, we say yes. So now in this case, the data is mirrored between these two. If for some reason something, once again, no real value on a virtual machine where there's only one real actual disk, but the idea is if you go here, now this mirrored drive, if I create a text document, right? If for whatever reason this drive were to fail, right? So it's it's offline because let's say it failed, I still have full access because it's a mirrored copy, right? So I still have the document, but if I lose both, right, then I lose the drive and lose everything that it had, right? So that's mirrored. And then of course, if both are online, then okay, so it broke the mirror. Okay, so it's definitely break the mirrored volume. Let's see if we can do this here. No, it's just having a problem. So you have to remove the mirror and then add a mirror. Alright, so disk 4 or 3 is no longer available. Not sure why we got a bad state there. Let's see. Okay, so disk 3 is back. So we'll just delete this volume. Alright, so that, let's see here, if we go in, do simple volumes, shrink the volumes. Right, so when you first add the disk, you have to initialize the disk. I can't show that on this, but here's what it does look like. When you bring up the disk management tool, if you have a new disk that you entered, this pop-up window will come up, and it'll ask you to initialize it and choose between a master boot record or a GUID partition, GPT. Once again, you're probably going to select GPT given the size of the drives that you're going to be dealing with. But this is what comes up when you add a new drive. You can also create volumes that are mount points. So let's see here. So if I want to do this here, do simple volume, all 20 gigs, we can do a mount point, and I can do this as on the mirrored drive. Well, maybe I can't, but we'll just see. Mount point F by data. Let's see here. By data. And so then we'll go next. We'll just do by data. So what we did is we created this whole drive now is just a folder on the F drive. So there's this folder here, my data, and if say we had 5 actual disks, right? Disk 3 would hold all the my data, right? So once you put something in here, so we'll just do a bitmap image here, right? So this image actually resides on disk 3, right? So of this machine, because the my data folder, anything in the my data folder is actually on disk 3. So let's just do this. So if I do and take this offline, right? Now I can't get to the my data folder, right? So the bitmap and everything is on this disk. If I put it back online, then I can get to the data because it lives on disk 3. So that's mappings, and so you can have very large installations where you just have one drive, and all these separate folders are disks, and so you can have massive disks or massive folders, right, that are several terabytes in nature. And so, for example, if you get like 4 terabyte drives, you could have the one that you assign a drive letter to, But then you can have folders that can each house 4 terabytes because they're each a separate disk. And so instead of just offering 4 terabytes of storage, you can have hundreds of terabytes of storage depending on how many disks you have. But that's how you map a mount point in Windows. Let's see. Right, and here it's just showing you, instead of the C projects residing on the C drive, it actually is on another mounted drive. Right, you can work together as a single volume, right? So if we go back here, let's go ahead and delete the volumes. Okay, and if we go in here, we can do a spanned volume, right? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? We can add all 5 disks, give it a drive letter of F, and this is spanned, right? Format it, and we want to convert them to dynamic disks. So now it's going to format all these. And now we have one drive with 5 disks, right? So this F drive is now 85 gigs, right? I had 4 20 gig drives, and so it's even got my document on there from when I had the disk 1, right? Disk 1 is 5 gigs right here. It's part of it, so you can do partials, right? So and it had a file on it already, so it's already there, and we just added to it, right? Okay, let's see. And then we with RAID, you can do mirroring, striping, RAID 0. I showed you that, right? It's 2 or more hard drives, but it does not provide fault tolerance or backups or recovery. Mirroring does provide fault tolerance. It's RAID 1. And then there's other RAIDs available. Like I said, RAID 5 is available on servers, which is striping with parity. Let's see here. All right, so simple volume requires 1 or more. Stripe volume is 2 or more. Mirrored is 2, right? So you only do 2 in a mirrored, but you can do more in the striped. Let's see here. All right, so we covered the simple volume, span volume, stripe volume, mirrored volume. All right, you can choose to convert them to dynamic disks, right? So let's go ahead and move disk. All right, let's see here. Let's just delete volume and delete volume. Okay, so it's a basic disk. You can convert it to a dynamic disk, or when you're using the dynamic disk feature, it'll automatically convert it for you. But also I do want to show, I deleted disk 1, right? Oh, and so I lost the whole volume. So So it deleted everything. Alright. Alright, storage spaces, you can create storage pools. This is designed for resiliency. You have simple, two-way mirroring, three-way mirroring, and parity. Storage spaces. Create a new pool and storage space. All right. So unformatted drives. So all 5 of my disks are showing up. Right. Disk 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. My OS drive is not listed, so I'm okay. So I can, I can just do. Let's say I'm going to do with 3 disks. And we're going to create a pool, and we're going to call this RAID 5, right? Write your data with parity information, help protect from a single drive failure, right? So it's not really RAID 5, but it is RAID 5. Yeah. It allows you to lose a disk, and so if I create this storage space, right, or I can do a 3-way mirror, right? 3-way mirror storage writes 3 copies of your data, right, and protects you from 2 simultaneous drive failures. So if I actually had 3 physical drives, I would have to lose 2 drives before I lost my data. Or you can do the regular 2-way mirror, or just a simple storage pool. It just writes 1 copy of your data, doesn't protect you from drive failures, and it requires at least 1 drive. But so I can get 50 gigs of storage because I have 3 drives at 20 gigs each. If I do the 2-way mirror, I get 26 gigs of space, including 52 gigs of resiliency. Or a 3-way mirror, I can't do that because it requires at least 5 drives. Okay, so I need 5 drives to do a 3-way mirror, but a 2-way mirror, I get 26 gigs of usable drive space, and at least 52 gigs of resiliency. And then the parity, right? So we can do the parity, which to me is if you can lose a single drive, you can see that with the 3 drives, you get 34 gigs of usable space, which is a little better than the mirrored. So out of all these options, the parity is the better option if you want to be able to protect yourself from a drive failure. So we'll just go ahead and create this. And so we have a RAID 5E drive now, and then we can manage this. We can add drives. We can rename the pool. We can optimize the drive usage. We can view files. You can delete it. There's all kinds of things. So let's go ahead and add these 2 drives. And so now our capacity went up to 97 gigs, right? So we'll go in here now. If we do the 3-way mirror, if we do a 3-way mirror because we have 5 drives, we would get once again about 27 gigs for the 5 drives, but it protects you from 2 simultaneous drive failures, but you have to have 5 disks, right? So it's very expensive to ensure that you can lose 2 disks. Once again, our parity gives us a little bit more, right? 56 gigs available is 89. I'm sorry. Right, let's do the three-way mirror. Okay. So the three-way mirror now, it added it on, which is kind of odd how I didn't see that coming. But we have 27 usable gigs on the three-way mirror and 34 usable gigs on the parity. Let's go ahead and delete the storage space. And we'll delete that storage space. Let's do one more here. We'll create a storage space. We'll do a three-way mirror, and we'll create that. Oh, they create a parity. Let's delete it one more time. The mouse is really tricky here. Create a three-way mirror. Okay, so it did only create 29 gigs of usable space. So it took 5 drives, and yet we only have 29 gigs of usable space. That's a lot of overhead. Alright, so we'll delete that, and we'll go back here. Right, and so this is just showing our storage space, right? You got your physical devices. Oops. You got physical disks, right? You get 2 terabytes, 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte, 1 terabyte, 2 terabyte. These are physical, and then you can create your virtual storage spaces based off these actual physical disks. Which then can protect you. So you keep your data, especially if you're using the parity or mirrors, right? You can protect your data from any one drive failure. Okay. Right. If you actually have physical spinning disks, you can do defragment and defrag the drive, and that'll help keep the disk running smoother, faster. And you can use the trim on an SSD to erase blocks on that. But SSDs you typically don't need as much management as the spinning disks did. Right, so yeah, we know about the command prompt, and you can do an elevated command prompt. CLS will clear the screen. Right, Control C, Control Big, Control Pause will terminate commands in the window. Right. So files can be named A through Z, or 0 through 9, and include some of these characters, right? You'll see that the question mark is not one of those characters. There are others that aren't allowed in a name, but the question mark definitely is not in here. If you have spaces, you need to close the file name in double quotation marks if you're dealing in the command line, right? Wildcard is the question mark. Asterisk, right? Asterisk is not one of them that you can use because these are wildcards. So if you do a dir, a asterisk, period, question mark, question mark, question mark, it'll find any file that starts with the A with any 3-letter extension. And most of you have covered all these, right? You got help, you can type help or a question mark, you get help in DOS. dir, a list of directories. cd, to change directories. Copy is a good copy files. Xcopy, RoboCopy, or advanced copy features that have more functionality than just copy. Check disk, once again, this is for a spinning disk. It can find and correct bad sectors on a spinning disk. Most of the time, most of us are going to be dealing with SSDs going forward. There's fewer and fewer spinning disks that we'll deal with, but if you do, you can use check disk. Once again, defrag. You can format a drive or volume, and then you can shut down the computer using the shutdown command, or you can do shutdown with a reboot with a /R. You can look at some of these switches on that. And then command line interface, where you have the command line and PowerShell, and then Linux has the shell. PowerShell is the new scripting language for Microsoft. It is extremely powerful. It has a lot of already built-in commands or pluggable modules that you can use to troubleshoot and automate Windows. Gives the syntax, so a get-item retrieves files and folders, get-process, right? So that's the style of PowerShell. Right, so in Ubuntu, Bash on Windows, you can run Linux commands in Windows. You just have to install the Windows subsystem for Linux. And Ubuntu provides Bash, called Bash on Ubuntu on Windows. So you can run that as well. And this is just the mappings. So directory is the same as get-child item in PowerShell, or ls in Ubuntu. So it has, ping is ping in command prompt, or the Bash. It's test-net connection in PowerShell. And so you can see the mappings. Exit is the same in all three. Remote connections. You can use remote desktop connection, remote desktop protocol. And so let me see here. I want to make sure. Okay, so I have another machine that I have on here, another VM, RDP. So the machine name is Team. So I'll just connect to Team and password 1. And it's asking me to view the certificate because we're not in the same domain, because I don't have a domain server or domain. So do you want to see the certificate? It's like, yeah, it's issued to Team, issued by Team. So we'll install this on the local machine, and so now anytime that I make this connection, I won't see this again, because I've installed this certificate. So now I'm logging into remotely. So this could be in another part of the world. It doesn't matter. This RDP session works no matter, as long as I can get to it over the internet. This will work. And then now I'm on my Teams machine, and you see it looks very different, and I don't have PowerPoint or anything. And so I can minimize it, and I can go back to my machine, or I can maximize it, and then I can just sign out. But it allows me to use the desktop just as if I was there. Okay. Right, so computers set up to serve a remote desktop are not really secure. When you do this, you do have to open up remote desktop and allow it through the firewalls and things like that. So it's not really secure. But if it's on your internal network, it's not so bad because you just allow only people locally, and especially if you have a domain, it's only domain users, things like that. It's a little more secure, but it is needed if in certain situations to be able to work. Especially nowadays in this environment, a lot of people are using remote desktop to connect. Now, most of the time, in order to do that, you would create a virtual private network, or VPN. So you would VPN into the organization's network, and then you would remote desktop locally, because you would create a tunnel that would make you appear to be local, as if you were at the company, and then you would RDP in. That way you wouldn't open it up through your firewalls. You have to have a connection first, so it makes it a little more secure. Remote systems is a little different, but it's very similar to remote desktop. This is where the user stays logged in, but a support person can technically remote desktop in and see what they're doing. And so you can have two users at the same time on a machine, and the support person can then see what's happening and or take control and do some things. And so it's definitely very useful, but it uses a lot of the same features of remote desktop. But it allows two users to be on a desktop at the same time. As you can chat, you can request control, you can hide the desktop from the service analyst if you need to find something. Of course, you can disconnect or stop, log the activity, and you can change the expiration of invitations. So you can, because you send out an invitation via email and they're able to come in. But you can change it and say, no, I've changed my mind, and expire the invitation. And then there's all kinds of third-party tools that allow you to remote in. TeamViewer, Go to My PC, Log Me In, Zoom. Technically, Google Hangouts. All kinds of things are now available that you can do a lot of this stuff from. And that is our chapter 13.